Uh, Spoilers at this time, Mark. Sorry. So maybe I'm crazy, but anime for 2023 felt kinda bad. I recently started getting back into watching anime in 2022 after picking up weekly manga again. Thank you, Shonen Jump app. This app. What the hell are you guys doing over there, huh? I didn't watch a ton of anime last year, and a lot of seasons felt cluttered with poo trash. Without a doubt, though, one of the most anticipated seasons last year was the long-awaited Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2. Everyone knows what this is at this point. It's one of, if not the biggest shonen going on right now, and is what put Mappa on the map. Even if you don't know it, you know this white-haired, long, skinny man without a doubt. You've seen them all on your social media, don't even lie. I know there's thirst trap edits. Before the new season even dropped, the trailers for the first part were beautiful, and Tatsuya Kitani's Where Our Blue Is slaps harder than any anime song out of the year. When the season finally started, of course I was in that every week, loving every minute of it. Then when it went on break, and when the Shibuya arc finally started, I saw the first couple episodes until I started lacking behind because when a good thing goes bad. And then the unfortunate thing happened that plagued so many consumers. Spoilers. I got spoiled twice, and both were major spoilers too. One was from a friend. You know who you are if you're watching this. You know you can't live this down. So after holding out for as long as I could, and after hearing all the hell going on at Mappa with this season's production, I finally said, fuck it, I'll read it. Now, after being fully caught up in the manga, I'm here to proudly say, JJK kinda sucks ass. So is it a hot take to say that JJK isn't good? I don't really know, probably. But it's the unfortunate truth. It's not a pleasant realization that if Mappa wasn't the one dialing up the animation for that series to 20, it probably wouldn't have blown up the way it did. While the manga has a bit of a messier art style, both it and the anime become nothing more than eye candy once you really start to dissect the series. Hell, not even dissect. Just think about the things that are happening or talk it out with a friend. In the series' defense, it doesn't really start to become bad or at the very least questionable until the Shibuya arc. The opening segment is pretty great. There's an immediate hook and growing anticipation with the dual hero and villain relationship, especially down the line after Sukuna sees something in Megumi. Being introduced to the upper class and other school was fun and expanded the world a bit. The heart-wrenching introduction to the sorcerer world for Itadori and Nanami made you feel something. Even Megumi creating his first domain expansion. Look at this dude's grin! And of course, Gojo being Gojo. That first season was great, and the movie that came after was even more badass. Gojo's flashback in the opening of season 2 was just incredible. The turn it takes towards the end and getting that deep dive into the most powerful sorcerer's past and deep relationship was just... it was so good. Why does this opening still make me have a physical reaction, bro? JJK had such a great start, but then about halfway through the Shibuya arc, it all starts to slowly crumble before inevitably falling apart on itself. And while I won't say what specifically causes this right now, it's still important to note. The Shibuya arc is easily the longest arc so far. I'm not even gonna fact check that. I'm that confident. While the beginning shines with Mekamaru and a bit after, the second act is where it starts to lose me, and considering how long the arc is, it's a pretty long time to scratch your head wondering why certain decisions were made. But you know what? I'm getting a little ahead of myself. The easier and more glaring issue is front and center, and that's with the main boy himself, Itadori. When you think back at shonen of ye olde back in like 2005. Jesus Christ, help me. Protagonists were pretty simple. Gon wants to find his dad, Naruto wants to be Hokage, Luffy wants to be the Pirate King, and so on and so forth. While they have straightforward goals, they're full of personality and determination. Demon Slayer is shit, yeah, I said it and I'm right, but Tanjiro at least falls in line with older protagonists since he just wants to find a way to make his sister human again. No, I'm not fully in the loop of massive shonen right now. I haven't touched Dandadan at all yet, but I think Denji from Chainsaw Man is a great modern day shonen protagonist. He's kind of just a guy who got dealt a bad hand and is trying to figure out, well, everything, really. His aspirations are small and kind of childish. He's honestly kind of an asshole, but he's also just a teenager in a fucked up world, so it kind of makes sense. Mind you, all of these characters also have the ability and strength to back up everything they say. Itadori, on the other hand, that's a different story. Off the rip, his whole deal is to die now or die later. Eventually, that evolved into wanting to make sure Megumi is okay. And that's fine, but almost immediately, we're surrounded by people way more interesting than him. Megumi is chill and reserved, but we get a hint that he might be fucking wild. And once we see him form his first domain, we want to see a complete version of that. Nobara seems pretty flat in one note at the start, I can admit that, but once you get her backstory and find out she kind of has a screw loose, she becomes kind of fun. Plus, her curse technique is really cool. Inumaki is probably the least interesting of the second years, sure, but Maki and Panda are super cool in terms of origins and abilities. In the other school, we get Mai, who's Maki's sister, and we get a lot about the super important Zenin family. And also, girl got a whole Glock, like what? Nekomaru is a fucking robot. He's already better than some characters with that alone. Momo and Miwa are fine, but then we got this man, Toto, and like, come on now. Kamo is there too, I guess, but Toto, bro, look at Toto. Then we get freaking Nanami, and I mean, Mappa did you thirsty motherfuckers a favor. Kinda. Oh yeah, and then fucking Gojo. Already! Everyone is already super cool and can already do crazy shit. Yuji, in comparison to most, if not all, already kinda sucks. He went through training for what, a week? Month? He couldn't muster anything other than stronger punches. And look, that could be fine, but when you have people who can summon Shikigami, target someone's soul, fights cursed spirits despite the fact that they have zero curse technique, is a literal witch, and is a literal panda, amongst others, you are severely lacking in interest and creativity to fights. Let's do a comparison. Bleach. I don't like Bleach, but it does basically everything better. Ichigo is a painfully bland character in terms of motivation. He's a real shit example of a reactive character, I think, but he does still have a personality that is distinctly different from other popular shonen MCs. Yuji is cardboard. Bleach as a series also has a pretty simple power system, I think, with Bankai, but I compare it still because everyone has a unique version of their Bankai. Is it a good comparison? I don't know. That's what my brain does. Shut up. But anytime Ichigo needs to train and get better, he comes out better and more interesting because of it. Yuji does not. Ichigo has legitimate and cool wins under his belt, whereas Yuji basically gets beat so hard he wakes up in Fortnite before someone else comes and helps him out. By himself, Yuji has shown zero potential, and the series does this really shitty thing where they do the tell but not show, and when they try to show it, it doesn't work out. Ever. He gets his shit kicked in towards the beginning with the finger bearer, would have been absolutely useless against Hanami if not for Toto. Nanami was with him against Mahito, and if he wasn't, that would have gone very differently. He had Nobara with him against the Cursed Wombs. Megumi was with him to fight the old barrier guy. Choco demolished him easy when he was alone. And Toto was with him again to fight Mahito again. He hasn't had a valid win since ever. He constantly needs help from people better than him. And all that makes me feel as a viewer and reader is to be way more interested in every other character. And this isn't even talking about manga material. You'd think with the strongest sorcerer ever inside of him, he'd be able to do something interesting, right? Nine-tailed fox. But no, dude just punches. You know what? Let's talk about Naruto some more. Anyone remember the beginning of the series where he runs off but comes back to save Iruka? Or when he came in to save Sasuke against Gaara? Remember how much he stepped up against Kabuto when he learned the Rasengan? Fucking pain? During the war arc, when he brought the man Guy back to life and gave Kakashi a new eye? Every single one of these moments are amazing. And you know what's crazy? Every other character in JJK gets that moment, and all of them are to save Yuji. Naruto has this presumably evil beast inside him, and even before they get buddy-buddy, he was still able to tap into its power whether it was intentional or not. That struggle that lasted for so long is not only better writing, but it's way more interesting to watch compared to Sukuna just shoving Itadori to the side. Why do I switch between Yuji and Itadori? What the fuck is wrong with me? Once again, making him pretty fucking irrelevant. You want to know what makes this so much worse though? I think you can probably guess. Yuji might be the official main character of JJK, but people get wet and show up for Gojo. Even people who don't engage with JJK at all have been infected with the widespread of this character. This modern-day sexy man of the internet is the strongest sorcerer in the world, and everyone knows it, and everyone is afraid of him. His personality and overwhelming presence steals whatever scene he's in, and people won't stop talking about him. Shogo shows up because he thinks he can serve Gojo, and all that does serve is to show how fucking wild he is. In the Goodwill event arc, everyone waits for Gojo to show up to take the barrier down and figure shit out. In Gojo's flashback, Nanami and basically everyone else knows that Gojo can handle everything that gets thrown their way. In the movie, Geto's whole plan is to keep Gojo distracted and outside the school because he's just too much. He's never not a big deal, and is so often the center of the plot. All those moments I just mentioned, Shibuya throughout the entire thing. Matter of fact, Gojo is the entire central goal after Shibuya for like 2 arcs. The power, the status, and overall presence and existence overshadows Yuji to the point where I wonder, why the fuck is this little boy here at all? Nobody cares about Yuji. People only care about Sukuna, and unfortunately, I can't talk about the rest of these points without getting into spoiler territory. Some of it is from the second half of Season 2, but it's all substantial enough that I'm gonna consider it spoilers. So skip to this time if you want to listen to the ending. If you want to stick around out of morbid curiosity or because you're impatient, cool. It gets a lot worse. Gojo gets sealed, and I think that's the smartest thing to do for the story. It was basically required. The problems start to poke their heads out as soon as he's removed from the story. It becomes an urgent mission to get Gojo out, which is fine, but everything that happens in that time is so questionable. Remember all those great and interesting characters I was talking about? Nanami, Nobara, and to an extent Todo, gone. 2 of the best characters in the series so far, and another that had so much potential completely removed. And for what? To make Yuji sad? To garner a reaction from the audience? Either way, it's dumb. After the initial shock, the only thing I could think was, wow, I basically have nobody to be invested in now. By that point, the only characters I actively cared about were Maki, Panda, and Yuta. And Megumi, I guess. Panda gets completely shafted with the rest of the Shibuya arc, by the way, and Maki, despite basically going through the same thing Nanami did, ends up living. Granted, Maki was basically my favorite character by that point already, and even though Mai ends up getting got unceremoniously, off screen by the way, it just makes Maki even better, and she's the only character I really care about at this point. Inumaki loses an arm again off screen, and the principal gets killed because of annoying writing reasons, which leaves half of the available students with basically no kind of authority figures or anyone to train them. And it wasn't until I started writing this where I realized JJK basically had 0 training arcs. And some people might like that, but let me run the statement back of telling and not showing. The main 3, Maki and Panda, were all nominated to become grade 1 sorcerers. One of them hasn't had a valid win by himself, another one died, and later on, another is reduced to nothing more than a plushie. Clearly, these students weren't good enough with their innate abilities alone and could have used some fucking training. If a training arc is written well or it's not sluggish, there's nothing wrong having one. Let's talk more shit about Yuji and him really not being him. He's just not that guy. So at the end of the Shibuya arc, his death sentence is put back up, and best boy Yuta finally emerges from the shadows and makes the quickest work of him. And by the way, Yuta is another one that's chock full of main character energy, so much more than Yuji, and way more interesting ability-wise. So we get rid of Gojo, who was the unofficial MC, and replace him with Yuta, who should have just been the MC from the start. What's even more annoying about this is that Yuta makes a passing comment about how Yuji was holding back during the fight, which, like, even if he was, Yuta still could have two-pieced him like it was a fucking Sunday morning. But moving right along to the next major arc, the Culling Game, and ignoring the fact that we get another badass Ex Machina ass character who's better than Yuji again, Itadori gets one real fight, and he gets his ass handed to in that fight too. The only reason he technically wins is because he's a pure guy or whatever mushy bullshit reason he gets. Meanwhile, Maki demolishes the entire Zenin clan, new third-year Hakari wins 2 fights and saves Panda, and Yuta basically spars with 3 high-level ass opponents. cold-blooded too. Yet we have Itadori over here looking like Ash from season 1 of Pokemon getting gifted wins for nothing. Here's the really shitty thing though. Towards the end of this arc, Itadori and Megumi both get fucked over in a huge way. For a while, Megumi was just a background character, but took real agency with this arc. One of his main objectives for this entire series, and this arc too, was to make sure his sister was okay and safe. That's his one and only reason to do everything he does. Well, turns out his sister had an awakened sorcerer inside of her and became evil and runs off. And before the good guy group can do anything about it, Sukuna takes over Yuji's body and forces Megumi to eat a part of him, effectively swapping himself out of Yuji and into Megumi. Some chapters later, after Yuji and Maki fail to stop him, Sukuna kills Megumi's sister for plot reasons. Let's review what just happened in the span of just a few chapters. Yuji lost the most compelling thing about him and is now fully irrelevant compared to the little remaining characters we have left, and Megumi has effectively been removed from the story, as well as his only motivation he's had through the entire story. Awesome, dude. Great! And just as a side, before I was able to record this, I watched this video from Radman that was discussing Yuji as a main character in a positive light. I went in open-minded, but the more I watched, the more I couldn't be on board with any of it. Watch it for yourself so you can get another opinion on Yuji, but I'm going to kind of generalize what he says since I've already had so much to say. Basically, he talks about how emotionally compromised he is and how that fluctuates as the story progresses, how his motivation changes throughout the events, and him accepting that he's just a cog in the system, acting originally from a place of selflessness and for the sake of others to doing things for his own reason. He makes some good points in this video, but a lot of his points either don't hold up or are either true but still end up being detrimental to the rest of the characters. I'll be honest, I had to get a friend's second opinion on this because I knew it felt wrong, but I didn't know how to convey it. So thank you, one friend. I'll be using some of your words here. Radman, for the most part, kinda just headcanons a lot of his claims. He reads way too deep into things instead of just taking what the writer is giving. He's kind of just creating his own subtext to make it seem deeper than it actually is, therefore making it good, when in reality it's not. He tries to say Yuji's reactions to things are signs of his trauma, and like, sure, maybe he's got survivor's guilt and seen some fucked up shit, but in terms of the actual writing, it's written like shit. Radman also tries to claim that we purposefully aren't given a lot of information about Yuji, but we aren't given a lot of information about most characters in this story. Most of the characters we've gotten the most insight on are fucking dead. Even if every point he made in this video was valid, it still reduces other characters in this story as nothing more than fodder and fuel to Yuji, which isn't good character writing. Why would I engage with a story if the only good character is the main character? And vice versa, why would I engage with a story where every character is great besides the main character? And last thing I'll say, he makes it a point to say how he's not really special in the sense that he's just like everyone else involved, and how that's a good thing actually. While I can see where he's coming from, and would actually agree with that statement under different circumstances, I think that largely ignores all of the shortcomings I already spoke about as a main character. It also kind of devalues everyone else since they're so much more notable than him too. I'm not saying Radman's video was bad, it was well put together and well spoken. I just think it ignores a lot of obvious issues that are plain to see, while also making too many assumptions to shine a positive light. Again, go give it a watch for yourself, but I can't get on board with that opinion. Especially when you say the true villain was just the Jujutsu Society. Like, come on, man. Alright, anyway, this series does a horrible job at bringing characters up. All it does is beat them down. And while that can be a good thing, when that's all it ever does, it's kind of exhausting and it makes me wonder how these characters are supposed to compete. Prime example, Geto, who isn't really Geto, shows up to take Tengen and ends up fighting Choco. He's a good guy now, don't fucking question it. And Yuki, who has barely been a part of the story and is one of the only 2 special grade sorcerers on Earth, and even after creating a fucking black hole, she still loses and dies. But Choco is saved for some fucking reason? Once again, removing a much more interesting character only to leave us with a very middle of the road one. I swear to God, this dude has a hard-on for Choco. Like, I don't understand how important being a death painting actually is. This dude cannot be that important. It's questionable writing at its finest, and it becomes the most questionable once Gojo ends up coming back on the scene to fight Sukuna. The fight between 2 heavy hitters is easily the worst fight in the series, and that shouldn't be a statement that's allowed. Power system in JJK is so complicated because everyone essentially plays by their own rules with the exception of a few things, and most of the fight is everyone else spectating from a fucking live feed, theorizing about how the fight can turn out. It's walls of text after walls of text that resort to so little. Towards the later bit of the fight, I think the mangaka realized how fucking boring that was to read, so it becomes mostly action again, And by the time you think Gojo won, the next chapter starts with younger versions of Gojo, Geto, Nanami, and that other guy who was barely showing up talking in the airport. Gojo's talking like he's already dead, and it's confusing as fuck until you get to the page where Gojo's dead on the ground and cut in half. So, first of all, let's acknowledge the fact that JJK does the same annoying thing that Demon Slayer does, where we get little moments or flashbacks right before a character is dying, so you kind of just know when someone is for real dead. The only one that got away with it was Panda. But he's useless now, so did he even? Second of all, I can accept the ridiculous fact that Sukuna cuts like time and space, therefore being able to cut Gojo since he occupies space there or whatever. Fine. What I can't accept is someone who is weaker than him being able to easily avoid the same attack. There's legit no reason that plays out the way it does. The inconsistencies and nonsensical writing for this series boggles my mind so much. And the cherry on top? I never even mentioned how not Geto doesn't even have a half decent motivation to do anything he's doing. So his whole deal as an antagonist is just... Ugh. This story is exhausting. I don't really know how to describe Jujutsu Kaisen other than frustrating. It's so good until the one point where it takes the hardest right onto a dirt road with a car that was a few minutes away from collapsing under its own weight. So much wasted potential and missed opportunities with its characters. Ass-backwards writing that tries to invoke emotional reactions only to remove interest. Everything this series does is to the detriment of its characters, and in turn, to the story. You didn't give me enough time to care about certain characters. You didn't give some characters enough time to make an impact like other greats in anime for future events to garner the same type of emotional reaction. You beat these characters down only for them to lay on the ground and never be brought back up, and it's draining. JJK seems to want to call it subverting expectations, but once that's all your story does, and when it's for the sake of shock value, it doesn't become anything more than some edgy teenager writing a story and thinking it's cool and different, and it's just not. And you know, it's funny. After catching up and talking with friends about it and fully immersing myself in what fans put out there on the internet, it's kind of taken my brain over. There hasn't been a day that's gone by where I don't see a few really funny JJK memes, and I'm never upset about it. I love watching people meme on how Megumi is just ready to just fucking die. Like, dude is basically asking for it. The more that I think about the series, the more I actually like Nobara. It made me realize my favorite arc is Gojo's flashback. It's not complicated, and it doesn't try to be more than it is. It's a personal but tragic end of a friendship. It's a god among men being challenged, both in skill and in ideology. It makes Gojo a better character. It makes Geto a better character. I've watched a few videos from other people who love this series and who love Yuji as a character. Whenever they describe the series, it's usually along the lines of being real in a harsh and unforgiving world. That people die, and it doesn't always serve a purpose, nor does it have to be in a grand or dignified way. That nobody is special, not even the main character. That Yuji, the main character himself, goes through constant pain, loss, and suffering because his idolized aspirations have no place in that world. That his conformity to the cruel reality he lives in is powerful, but his strong sense of self is what makes him such a strong character. Even though every main character has that last bit. And look, all of that, every bit of that, I can get behind. But it's not written well. Way too much of it is in the subtext, and you really have to fight to get to that conclusion. Even if that's what Jujutsu Kaisen truly is, this raw and unrelenting story. That's exactly what it is at the end of the day. A story. It can be all of those things, but it could also be better than what it currently is. And to be real, when someone goes as far to say that Yuji can be seen as a self-insert for the reader, where we have expectations and hopes, only to conform and accept the type of story being told, that's pretty fucking ridiculous. Dare I say, that's kinda cope, bro. But hey, if you want a real best modern shonen, go watch or read Chainsaw Man. Part 1 is only 96 chapters, and part 2 has been going so strong. You'll thank me later. God, I hope they don't fuck up the movie.